I need to talk about something, and I already know it's going to make me sound like a terrible person.
Go ahead.
I have a friend, known him for years. Good guy, genuine, but every single time I spend time with him, I leave feeling drained, like someone opened a valve and let all my energy out. He's going through stuff, always going through stuff. Job problems, relationship problems, money problems. And I listen, I try to help, but nothing ever changes. And lately, I've noticed something worse.
What?
After I see him, I start thinking differently about my own life. I start seeing problems I didn't see before. I get cynical. Last month, after a long dinner with him, I went home and picked a fight with my wife over nothing. And I realized the next morning that I'd absorbed his energy, his outlook, like it leaked into me.
And you feel guilty about noticing that.
Horribly guilty because he's not doing it on purpose, he's struggling. And I'm sitting here thinking about cutting him off, which makes me feel like the worst friend alive.
Let me ask you something. If he had a contagious illness, something physical, would you feel guilty about keeping your distance?
That's different.
Why?
Because a virus isn't a choice. You can't help being sick.
Can he help being the way he is?
I mean, he could try harder, he could change some things, but also some of it is just who he is at this point. His patterns are deep. He's been this way as long as I've known him.
So he carries something that transfers to the people around him. It's not physical, it's emotional, but the mechanism is the same. You're in proximity and something passes between you that you didn't ask for and can't easily shake off. And you want to call it something other than contagion because that sounds cruel, but the effect on your life is identical.
You're saying misery is literally infectious?
I'm saying emotional states are more contagious than most people realize, and it's not metaphorical. When you sit with someone who's anxious for 2 hours, your nervous system starts mirroring theirs. Your breathing changes, your thought patterns shift, you start scanning for threats you weren't seeing before. It's not weakness, it's biology. Humans are social animals wired for emotional synchronization. It kept us alive in tribes. When one person sensed danger, the whole group needed to feel it fast. But that same wiring means that chronic negativity, chronic helplessness, chronic unluckiness doesn't stay contained in one person. It radiates.
But I can't just evaluate every friendship based on how it makes me feel. That's selfish. People go through hard times. If everyone abandoned their friends the moment things got difficult, there'd be no friendships left.
You're right, and I'm not talking about someone going through a rough patch. Everyone deserves support during a crisis. A friend gets laid off, goes through a divorce, loses someone, you show up. That's not negotiable. What I'm talking about is different. I'm talking about the person for whom crisis is the permanent state. Not because life is exceptionally cruel to them, but because they've built an identity around suffering. They've become so fluent in the language of problems that they can't speak anything else.
How do you tell the difference between someone who's going through something and someone who is the something?
Time. A person in a genuine crisis changes over time. They grieve, they struggle, they adapt, they eventually shift. It's not linear, but there's movement. The person I'm describing doesn't move. You have the same conversation with them in January and in November. The names change, different boss, different partner, different landlord, but the story is identical. They are the common denominator in every disaster, and they can't see it. Or they can, but they've made peace with it in a way that makes the pattern permanent.
That's him. I just described 6 years of the same dinner conversation with different details.
And in those 6 years, how have you changed?
I've grown a lot, actually. New role, better marriage mostly, started a side project I'm excited about.
And does he celebrate any of that?
He says the right words. That's great, man. But there's this flatness. And then within 30 seconds, we're back to his thing, his situation, his problem. And I've noticed that when good things happen to me, I've started not telling him because I know it'll either get dismissed or turned into a comparison about how things aren't going well for him.
So the friendship has already changed. You're already censoring yourself. You're already protecting your own energy by withholding parts of your life. The distance you're afraid of creating is already there. You're just not naming it.
Yeah, that's accurate.
And here's the deeper problem. It's not just about him. It's about what proximity to that pattern does to your capacity to show up for everything else. Your wife, your work, your side project, your own ambitions. Emotional energy is finite, Every hour you spend absorbing someone else's despair is an hour you don't spend building something. And the cruelest part is that the drain is invisible. You don't feel it happening in the moment, you feel it afterward. The low mood, the cynicism, the fight with your wife over nothing. Those aren't random events, those are symptoms.
Okay, but let me challenge this from the other side. Aren't we supposed to be resilient? Can't I just be stronger about it? Set boundaries within the friendship instead of cutting it off.
You can try, and for some people that works. But boundaries with a chronically unhappy person are like sandbags against a river. They slow the water, they don't stop it. Because the nature of someone who is deeply embedded in their own suffering is that they don't respect boundaries. Not maliciously, but unconsciously. They need an audience. They need someone to absorb what they're carrying. And if you set a boundary, let's not talk about work tonight, they'll route around it. They'll bring it up through a side door. They'll sigh and wait for you to ask what's wrong. The pull is constant because the need is constant.
That's exactly what happens. I've tried changing the subject. It lasts about 4 minutes.
History has a powerful example of this. There was a court figure in 17th century France, a man named Lauzun. He was charming, talented, briefly one of the most favored men in Louis XIV's court. He had everything: proximity to the king, romantic prospects with one of the wealthiest women in Europe, military appointments. But Lauzun had a quality that slowly poisoned every advantage. He was perpetually aggrieved. Every slight, real or imagined, consumed him. Every setback became a personal vendetta. He alienated ally after ally, not through incompetence, but through the relentless gravity of his dissatisfaction.
What happened to him?
People withdrew, one by one. Patrons who championed him went quiet. Friends at court stopped inviting him to gatherings. Even the woman who loved him, the Grande Mademoiselle, one of the richest women in France, eventually couldn't sustain it. He spent years imprisoned, partly because of political missteps, but largely because he'd burned through every relationship that might have protected him. His talent was real, his connections were real, but the weight of his unhappiness drove everyone to a safe distance, and when he needed allies most, the room was empty.
Because nobody could afford to stand next to him anymore.
The cost was too high. And that's the thing people miss about chronically unhappy people. It's not that they're bad. Lauzun wasn't evil, your friend isn't evil, but they carry a gravity that pulls everything nearby into their orbit, and orbits decay. The closer you stay, the more energy it takes to maintain your own trajectory. At some point, you're not orbiting anymore, you're falling.
So what do I actually do? Because avoid the unhappy and unlucky sounds like a bumper sticker for sociopaths. In real life, these are people I care about.
And you care about them, and that's fine. But caring about them doesn't mean merging with them. The most important thing you can do for yourself, and honestly for them, is protect your own state. Because here's the irony. A drained, cynical, depleted version of you is useless to everyone, including your friend. If his energy pulls you down, you don't become a better friend, you become a worse one. You show up resentful, you half listen, you check the clock. That's not friendship, that's obligation wearing a mask.
So what's the alternative?
You control the dosage. You don't cut someone off with a speech, you adjust the frequency. The weekly dinner becomes monthly, the 2-hour phone call becomes 30 minutes. You stop being available on demand, and critically, you fill the space you've opened up with people who energize you. People who are building, moving, creating, not because happy people are morally superior, but because their energy compounds in the other direction. After an hour with someone who's excited about life, you leave wanting to build something. That's not a coincidence. That's the same contagion working in your favor.
So the same wiring that makes negativity contagious also makes positivity contagious.
Exactly. And most people are careless about this. They let their social environment happen by accident. Whoever's around is around. But the people who sustain high performance, creativity, optimism, they curate. Not ruthlessly, not coldly, but deliberately. They gravitate towards people who make them sharper, braver, more alive, and they create gentle distance from people who do the opposite. Not with cruelty, with awareness.
But what about the guilt, though? Because I hear everything you're saying and it makes sense. But the guilt of pulling away from someone who's struggling, that's real. It sits in your chest.
The guilt is real, and it tells you something important about who you are. You're someone who cares about people. Don't lose that. But guilt can also be a trap. It can keep you in situations that are slowly dismantling you out of misplaced duty. And the question you have to ask yourself is, who else is paying for my loyalty to this person? If the answer is your wife, your energy, your mental health, your ambitions, then the guilt isn't protecting your friend, it's sacrificing everyone else on his altar.
I never thought about it as a transfer of cost, that by staying close to him, I'm exporting the damage to the people who actually depend on me.
That's exactly what it is. Emotional exhaustion doesn't stay in one compartment. You don't absorb his negativity and contain it neatly. It leaks into everything. It shows up as impatience with your kids, as distance from your wife, as a creative block on your side project. And none of those people did anything to deserve that. They're just downstream from a relationship you haven't adjusted.
I think the hardest part is admitting that compassion has a cost. I want to be the person who can carry other people's weight without it affecting me. But that person doesn't exist, does it?
No, that person is a fantasy. Even therapists, professionals trained to hold other people's pain, have supervision, boundaries, time limits. They don't absorb endlessly. They've built systems to process what they take in, and they go home at the end of the day. You've been acting as an unlicensed therapist with no boundaries, no training, and no closing time. Of course it's destroying you.
When you put it that way, it sounds obvious.
Most things do from the outside. It's when you're inside the relationship, inside the guilt, inside the pattern, that it feels impossible to see.
So, I'm not a bad friend for protecting myself.
You're a bad friend if you don't. Because the version of you that shows up drained, resentful, and half-present, that's not a friend. That's a hostage. And no one benefits from a hostage pretending to be there voluntarily.
You know what I just realized? I've been so focused on not hurting him that I didn't notice how much I've been hurting myself and the people around me. The people who actually feel me instead of draining me. I've been giving them my leftovers while he gets my full attention.
That's the reallocation most people never make. They give their best